Hello, everyone. Today, I'm going to teach you how to photograph your artwork to increase your sales. I'm Steve Schlackman. I'm the Product Innovation Director at Artrepreneur, and I'm also a fine arts photographer. And I will take the skills I've learned over the past couple of decades to show you how to easily photograph your art so that it looks best online. So, what is the goal of the seminar? Well, it's to teach you how to photograph your work. You've worked hard on it and you've made it look beautiful, and the images of it should also look beautiful. So, we're going to show off its beauty and quality. I'm going to show you a variety of options that you can use at different price points that are all economical with the goal of increasing your opportunity for sales. So, we're going to look at three topics in this video. First, we're going to look at the camera, the requirements, the settings, and what kind of software you might want to use. And then we're going to look at how to set up a mini studio so that you can photograph the work. And then, in particular, look at the lighting so we can make sure that all of the colors are perfect and that we don't have hot spots or dark areas. So, first, let's look at the camera itself. What we prefer is a camera that has manual or assisted controls where everything isn't just automatic. So, we have some control over how things work, things like shutter speed and aperture, which is how big the lens will open. Now, you don't need anything fancy for lenses. It could be just a mid range or wide angle. We also want the images to be in a raw file format that we can bring into other software. And I'll talk about raw in a minute. And then you're going to need some kind of image processing software. You don't have to worry about low light performance or super sensitivity in the camera to capture images in dark areas because we're going to be using lighting. You don't need a high megapixel count either. We're not blowing these pictures up for print. So first, let's look at what we mean by raw. And that's why you don't want to use an iPhone or a really inexpensive camera because they don't shoot in RAW. They usually shoot in a file format they call JPEG. Now, JPEG is a compressed format. So to understand this, I want you to think of a sensor as a series of decks of cards. And each deck represents a different aspect of the image: light, contrast, color, red, green, blue. So what the sensor does is it collects all of this information, and then in a camera that doesn't shoot RAW, one that's shooting JPEG, which is compressed, it looks at the cards. It says, this looks like it's the right light. This looks like it's the right color. This looks like it's the right contrast. And it pulls out a card from each of the deck, puts it together to make the picture, and discards the rest. Now, the problem with that is that you're letting the camera make certain decisions. It doesn't really know what you want. It really doesn't know what the perfect color was. If you're shooting in RAW, you basically open up the image and all of the information is there. Different variations of the color and the different variations of the light, and you get to choose what those cards are going to be. So when you have a RAW image, you have much more information. The question is, how do you get a RAW camera and how much would it cost? So RAW cameras aren't too expensive. You can buy an Olympus EP1, which is an older Olympus. The Canon 1000D is priced at Amazon at $159. A better camera is $446, but this camera and many, many others you could rent at places like lensrental.com. So this camera, the Canon D3500, is a 7-day rental for $32 for 7 days. So whether to buy or to rent really depends upon how much work you create and how often you want to take pictures of it. Let's also look at how a camera works. So first, let's start with aperture. Aperture is how wide the lens opens up, meaning how much light is being brought inside of the camera. Now, if there's not enough light, then the pictures will be dark. If you bring in too much light, you'll get these white areas that have no information because the sensor gets what they call burned out. It was just too bright for the sensor to handle. So in general, when you're, let's say, outside in heavy sun, you're going to want to let in less light. If you're in a dark area, like inside your house, then you're going to want to open the lens up a little bit and have more light. One thing that people often get confused is the numbers. All you have to know is that it's sort of backwards. The higher the number, the smaller the opening. The smaller the number, the bigger the opening. The one thing you do need to know is this little area at the top, which shows what they call depth of field. The smaller the opening, the more distance will be in focus. So you can see here there's a little man and a mountain way in the background. So when your camera is set at the smallest lens, f22, and let's say you use your focus and you focus on the person, so the depth of field is the distance that will be in focus beyond the object that you're actually focusing on. So if I'm focused on a person in front of me and I want the mountains way in the distance to be in focus, then I'm going to need to make my lens smaller. Now let's say it's a little bit darker out and I need more light. So I open up my lens all the way so I can get more light in. I open the aperture. Well, now what happens is the depth of field is smaller, and so things in the background will be out of focus. This is important depending upon the kind of thing you're taking a picture of. Let's say you're taking a photo of a large outdoor sculpture or installation. You want to make sure that the front of the sculpture and the back of the sculpture are both in focus. And what you can find is if you have your lens open, you can have the front of the sculpture in focus and the back blurry. Okay, so that's aperture. Shutter speed. That's the speed that the shutter opens and closes in front of the lens. So that changes the way that light comes into your camera. The longer that the shutter stays open, the more light that comes in. On the other hand, the faster the lens opens and closes, the less light that's going to be allowed in. You're balancing the speed of the shutter against the opening of the lens. You want to make sure there's enough light coming in to take a picture, not too much, not too little. The problem is that the slower the shutter, the more blurry moving objects can get. So let's say you're inside and there are a lot of people moving around. Well, to freeze the people's movement, you want to use a fast shutter speed, let's say 1/250th. But let's say it's not that bright in the room, and you have your aperture opening as wide as it can go so you can get as much light in. But you're also taking a fast shutter speed. Well, the total amount of light may not be enough to show up well on your camera sensor. Everything may end up being dark. You may end up having to slow the shutter speed, but that may also make things more blurry. And so maybe you just need a flash or external light so that you get more light in the room. One other way that you can get more light into the system without actually using external light is to change the sensitivity of the camera sensor, which is called ISO, which you can see here. The one thing, though, is that the more sensitive you make the sensor, the higher the ISO, the more sensitivity, the more likely you are to get grain and blotchiness and artifacts. Okay, so let's talk about the setup, the studio, the place where you actually want to take these pictures. The goal here is to focus on the art. We want to see the art. We don't want the eye looking at extraneous things that take their focus away from the thing that you're trying to show off. So what we want to do in the studio situation is to limit the distractions. You don't want to have any colors in the background or that compete with the art. And if you look at the picture on the left, a lot of people would just go up and do what I did here, but look at the distractions. There's ceiling area, there's these lines and weird shadows at the bottom and other objects that sort of distract. So if I was taking a picture of this to sell, I would take it off the wall and put it into the studio situations that we're going to talk about so we don't have all of these distractions. So let's just talk about an easy DIY setup. In this case, I just took a picture of an orange. This picture on the left just shows how it was set up. This was done on a desk in my house. By curving this background, we get what we call continuous tone. And you can see on the right, that's what the picture ended up looking like after I took it. Now you'll also see the shadow there. In this case, I wasn't using any lighting, so the light is just sort of coming from my ceiling light, and that's why you see this shadow that's off to the left. And we'll talk about that separately. So anything that works with a continuous tone, in this case, I'm using watercolor paper, but you can use bed sheets or anything else that seems like it would be continuous that you have at your house. And the only thing you want to make sure is that there are no textures or wrinkles or things like that. If you're going to use a pillowcase or a bed sheet as your background, you want to make sure that you iron the sheet before you use it and try not to have a lot of wrinkles because those things will show up. The easiest way is to buy a studio backdrop. So this will depend on how often you're going to take pictures, whether you want to invest in something like this. It's a fairly simple system. You've got two tripods with a bar that goes around the top. You've got three different colors of paper. The green is really for green screen, for video shoots. So in this case, for photography, you're probably going to stick with the white or the black paper. And then you have these little clamps that hold the paper to the top. Now, if you have smaller objects, if you're doing small crafts or jewelry or something like that, then you really don't need something large. And then you can get a small little box like this called the photo tent. Not only does it have the curved background, but it has a little tripod for your camera and lights. And the box itself helps minimize shadows. And it also has different color backgrounds, black, white, blue, and red. But now let's talk about lighting and about color. So light has different temperatures. So you can see here on the left, a regular noon daylight, direct sun is 5,000 degrees Kelvin. An early sunrise is 2,000 degrees Kelvin. Overcast daylight and a pale blue sky is 10,000 degrees Kelvin. And you can see how the color changes. The lower the temperature, the more red the work gets. Now, the sort of neutral that you want to get is 5,000 degrees Kelvin. That's what I tend to shoot at. On the right, you can see how the background color and the orange color change depending upon the lights. I used fluorescent and I used regular bulbs, and then I used 5000K LED bulbs. And the 5000K LED bulbs were the best ones, made it the most neutral, and you can see that one here. So the best way to just fix white balance to begin with is to use one of those daylight bulbs when we're setting up the lighting. Don't just use a regular incandescent bulb or some fluorescent lighting. Make sure that the bulbs that you're buying are 5000K, and then you'll have the most neutral light. And on the left bottom is just an image of what a white balance tool looks like when you bring a raw photo in. You can see how the temperature changes, and you can slide it back and forth and sort of change the temperature. So how do we just do a basic lighting setup? So what we're trying to do, again, is evenly light everything and minimize the harsh shadows or dark areas. Think of this lighting setup using a small sculpture on a table. The object has a bit of depth. There are shadows underneath it that we want to minimize. We want to make sure everything's in focus. So we set up our camera on a tripod, and then we use a cross lighting. We take lights, we put them at equal heights and equal angles, and so we shoot the right light into the object, and it's going to roll a shadow off. We want to get rid of that shadow. We put an opposite light on the left side. What happens is these cancel each other out. The shadow created by the left light is going to be minimized by the right light, and the right light shadow is going to be minimized by the left. And sometimes you also, because of the size of the object and the lights, you may get shadows that end up, even if they're soft, on the continuous tone background. So if that happens, there's a couple of things you can do. You can move the continuous tone background further back so that the shadows don't reach it. Or you can just add another light. You can put a light above facing down onto the continuous tone background that's out of the view of the camera, and that should take care of any shadows that end up on the continuous tone. You don't necessarily need expensive lighting. On the left, you see an aluminum clamp light you can get for $8 at your hardware store. You can throw a 5000K bulb in there and stick it on a chair. The other thing you want is a diffuser. Makes it a little bit softer, less intense. The less intense the light is, the more it shows evenly across an area. So you can buy lights that already have diffusers on them. You can take a pillowcase and put it on top of this aluminum light clamp, this diffusing material you can also get on Amazon. They have a sheet of 20 by 24 for $9. So here's a couple of lights and diffusers that you can buy. On the left is an umbrella kit. This one's about $50. Instead of facing the light directly on your object that you're photographing, it shoots the light into the umbrella, and the inside of the umbrella diffuses the light and then shoots the light back onto your object in a much softer and more diffused way. On the right is the photo tent we talked about before. Not only does it come with the tripod, but it comes with two self-standing lights, and you can see that there's also a diffuser built in to the light itself with that little piece of glass in the front of the light. And the box itself, the cloth around the box, also acts as a diffuser. So finally, let's just talk about the processing software. So the raw image, because it has both light and dark and multiple versions of color, you can't really see all of those things all at once. You can't see light and dark at the same time. You can't see a brighter red and a softer red at the same time. And so you have to make these choices. So before it becomes an image that you can work on, you have to give it its basic settings. So let's look at a few raw editors. First, you have Adobe Lightroom. This is one of the most common pieces of software and is a really good workflow for raw editing. It has a great library management system, but the downside of something like this is that it's $9.99 per month. So think about that over the course of a couple of years, and probably more if you keep going. You're spending hundreds of dollars on this piece of software. So alternatively, then you can use something like Affinity Photo, which is great. It's extremely fast. It's easy to use for non-photographers, but the raw workflow isn't as integrated as it is in something like Lightroom. It's a little bit more difficult, but at the same time, it's only $49 forever. On the other hand, you can use open source software. But if you look at something like Darktable, it has a database of images just like you do in Lightroom, and it has some pretty advanced functionality, but it isn't as polished. The learning curve, if you don't know that much about how these softwares work, might be a little too high to start with. And then again, there are lots of other pieces of software that you can use. So finally, I just want to mention one other tool that is a little pricey, but it's called the X-Rite Color Checker Passport, which is a way to do automated color correction. And it's particularly useful if you're using Lightroom because it has a Lightroom plugin. The basic idea is, you can see here on the left, there is a color card. And so when you're setting up your studio for that day, you stand this color card in front of the object that you're going to be photographing and take a picture of this. The software for the X-Rite Passport knows exactly what these colors are supposed to be. So when you bring in that picture into the Color Checker Passport software, it says, okay, this camera is a little bit off in this color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to correct all that first. And I'm going to create a little profile that says this lighting setup right now with this camera should have these corrections. And then when you bring your image into Lightroom, the first thing that you do is assign the profile, and that should automatically make sure all the colors are perfectly accurate.